Today, what I want to do is talk about credit unions. And I think if you don't work at a credit union and you're listening to this podcast, your initial take might be like, no, thank you, not interested, don't work in the industry. But you and I have had this incredible privilege of working for credit unions for a while now, and it's an eye opening experience. So, whether you know much about them or not, I think anytime you could look behind the curtain at a different industry, there's something to learn. Credit unions are not something that people typically think about. It's certainly not the sexiest category, but we absolutely love them. So, with that said, talk to me about what you've learned about credit unions and why we think they're so compelling.
It's interesting. I almost think like credit unions are a disruptor in the financial industry. The banking industry has gone through turbulent times, right? Since 2007, 2008 during the great financial crisis. And trust has eroded across the board. Then you had basically Silicon Valley Bank going down. Even the Fed has come in and those treasury bonds, which you thought were so great at 2%, and they raised the rates, and all of a sudden they're not worth nearly as much. So there's been data breaches. Uh, s- you know, a lot is going on. And then you look at credit unions, right? Member based. And uh, when you're member based, basically what you're saying is you're purpose driven, right? You're here for the members. And I think that is an incredibly powerful message to put into the market against a traditional legacy bank. And I think credit unions are waking up to this and they're capitalizing on it. And they're doing it through empowerment.
And when you say member based and purpose driven, can you unpack that just a little bit?
If you think about what this looks like to the outside consumer, because we're not for profit, we are going to be able to offer you better customer service, better rates, better features, better functionality, right? Better support across your family, your community, your state, your union, whatever it might be, that other banks can't offer.
Yeah.
And I think what that does is it ends up building trust. And trust is everything when you're making a financial decision.
Yeah.
People just want to know, are you going to be there for me when the shit hits the fan? And it's really tough for banks to make that claim today, even though they try their hardest.
Yeah. That is such a huge point, which is trust is not at the heart of every great brand in financial services. It's at the heart of every great brand in every category. And it really couldn't be much lower in financial services except for credit unions. And to your point, we all talk about authenticity. They have this real, authentic story to tell, right? Member first, better services in support of your very unique and narrow community. The issue is, and we talk about this ad nauseum in our industry, is how many branded messages people are exposed to every single day. Ballpark, 5,000 branded messages every day. Sometimes it's up to 10,000 branded messages. When you unpack that data, a lot of that is sort of hats, t-shirts, logos on the backs of cars. Like we're just surrounded by it. But if you just look at advertising alone, we went to our media team and had them engineer this for us, which was given the amount of dollars spent in advertising, given the rates of those ads, and given the number of people, every single person in our country, man, woman, child, octogenarian, is exposed to literally thousands and thousands of ads in the financial service category alone, even when they're not even in market, which is crazy, which makes it really tough for credit unions to stand out because, yes, they have this great, true, authentic story to tell, but they're caught up in the noise. So I think we boiled it down to, we've got this white paper coming out right now, and I think we've boiled it down to three key pillars. And the first one we talk about is empower, don't interrupt. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, I think empowerment's been used a lot and thrown around, but I think it falls flat for many consumers. Um, at the end of the day, empowerment is helping move somebody's life forward. And it's really hard to do that if your brand can't actually fulfill upon it or stand behind it. And I think that's where banks really have a tough time. You can try to put out educational content. You can try to do community events. You can try to do outreach or job fairs, to help people. But I think when we're talking about empowerment and moving somebody's lives forward, uh, it's only gonna work for, brands that can actually fulfill upon it, and I think that's where credit unions, I think, really have an upper hand, is where they're purpose-driven, mission-guided, and they usually will put just as much effort into marketing their message as they will into actual community outreach and events. And I think that's the difference. And I think it resonates a lot more. Now, look, you're not going to be able to get somebody who's only interested in a bank for its technology, features, functionality. There are certain audiences that it's just not going to resonate with. But I would argue even young audiences who are turned off by these legacy brands, which feel like they are taking more than they're giving, there is a place for credit unions to come in and show that they have shared values with those millennials and younger people. And that's why I think you're seeing credit union member growth grow across the country, especially in certain states with populations of people who actually want and welcome a company that wants to do more for its customers than it takes.
Yeah. I think you summarized that so well, which is empowerment is about moving people's lives forward one small step at a time. And what could be a more powerful category than financial services, right? What could be a more powerful creative canvas than credit unions, right? Like we work a lot in some pretty sexy industries. I recall multiple times showing like Suzuki case studies to some of our financial service clients and then saying, hey, every time you get up on our stage and share these stories, you're talking about these really cool products, but our product isn't that cool. And I was like, oh no, there's nothing cooler or sexier than giving people better control of their finances. They can own a brighter future. They can take care of their family. They can take care of their parents, their loved ones, you name it. So empowerment is about giving them those tools to really fulfill upon it, right? It might be immersive educational content. It might be calculators. It might be member stories. It might be just traditional ads, but those traditional ads aren't telling a BS story. They're just putting a transparent lens on something that you're actually doing, which is very often giving better customer service or actually going into the community and doing something. And to your point, like, look, do the giant banks do stuff like that? Yeah, with their chump change, with their, the leftover dollars in their pocket that they're not putting into traditional ads. But nobody believes that these biggest banks really care about their community. But by definition, credit unions really do. And that's a great canvas for telling that story and moving those lives forward.
Yeah, I just want to add on one thing. When people make a financial decision to move banks, um, they're looking to figure out who they trust, right? This is what it all comes down to. It's like, can I trust you with my money? Can I trust you with the security of my money? Can I trust that you're not going to screw me with bad rates or screw me with high fees? And, you know, most consumers do not want to understand all the financial jargon, nor can they understand all the financial jargon. So they're looking for a mental shortcut, right? Will you take care of me, right? The way I want to be taken care of? Will you take care of my family the way I want to take care of them? And they're looking for a mental shortcut. So you talk about empowerment, community outreach. These are all mental shortcuts to tell people that, yes, you can trust us. We will be there with your money, right? And I think that is the thing credit unions can do over other banks, because I think it's a quicker mental shortcut, and it's much harder to say, "Hey, I'm Wells Fargo, trust me. I'm Bank of America, trust me." I think that is an uphill battle, and they have to compete differently, like on features, functionality, and rates, which I would argue are transient. What you might have a great rate today, you're not gonna have a great rate tomorrow compared to your competitors. So you have to lean on something bigger than yourself.
Yeah. I love that term mental shortcut because I think in any industry, a mental shortcut is critical. Nobody has the time to really analyze every brand in every category for every decision they need to make. There has to be some shortcuts, and that's a huge point. So if the first big pillar is empower, don't just entertain people. And I think we didn't really dive into that, but let me just hit on that entertainment thing for a moment. Everything that you're describing is almost the exact opposite of what most financial institutions do. And it's a little bit outside of the industry, but when you look at insurance, for example, but that they spend so many dollars. Every single one of those companies, the top 4 or 5 companies, are spending $1 billion ballpark and just flooding the airwaves with all these goofy sophomoric messages, all this stuff that's totally unbelievable. And it works, frankly. If you got $1 billion paid media budget, you can make almost anything work. But I think that's the problem is it's not just the volume of ads that are out there, it's just the noise, the sophomoric, immature, goofy characters, silly messages. And to your point, empowerment creates that shortcut that will break through all of that noise. Now, if we keep going with this, if empowerment over entertainment is the first pillar, the next one is own the moments that matter. Can you unpack that one?
Yeah, so a moment that matters is something that happens in your life where you are stuck, right? You have this unmet need, and, it is a moment for a brand to insert itself and help you. I mean, it's basically what it is. And if you can figure out what those unmet needs are, right? Where these moments are critical to moving somebody closer to making a purchase, right, in their purchase journey, then you can win, right? And we would argue that you can compete against competitors with much bigger budgets because while they sit at the top of the funnel and they hammer the same message over and over again, right, with high frequency, you see it, whether it's a bank or a pharma ad, you've seen the ad 100 times. What it does is, yeah, like you can win through brute force. But if you're a challenger brand with a smaller budget, you can use these moments and show up and give people the right information and move them down the funnel, I would argue more efficiently and cheaper and faster, right? So if somebody is in the market for a new bank, Wells Fargo and B of A and others will hammer you over and over again throughout the year, or I can give you the right information around what a free checking account looks like at my credit union, right? I can give you information about what the rates look like. I can give you information about savings products. I could even then surround that with when you're ready, we have home loans, auto loans, we have credit cards. And if you read the signals correctly, and there are plenty of signals that come from data, first party and third, you can start to map out those moments that matter and insert your message at the right place in the right time.
Yeah. It's a huge point that you're making because I think so much in marketing and advertising, we talk about effectiveness. We don't talk enough about efficiency. And it's the brands that can be effective that are skewing all the industry data, right? You're all those insurance companies, you're the top 3 or 4 giant banks. You don't care about being that efficient. At the end of the day, to your point, brute force. Just so many TV ads at the top of the funnel and maybe so many banner ads at the bottom of the funnel. And even if it's not efficient, they've got such big budgets they can make it work. Meanwhile, first of all, nobody cares. That stuff is not only counterproductive, it's outright annoying, but they've got these moments that matter. And one of the indisputable truths about financial services, in particular credit unions, is you really can't get people to change their bank or change their credit union through marketing and advertising alone. There has to be a moment that matters. There has to be a life changing event. They have to move across country. They have to graduate college, graduate grad school, start their own business, get married, get divorced, retire. All of these things are very specific moments that matter. And then there are more granular moments that matter to your point about conducting research about checking, savings, investments. And you have to be careful with how you use the data. Not all that data is available and legal to use, but for the most part, all of those moments that matter give us data triggers, and we can satisfy those moments that matter with emotional content, inspire people to give them a better version of themselves, educational content, help them fulfill upon that vision, and then informational content to help them understand, okay, credit union, this is what makes us different and better than the competition. This is why you should enroll with us.
Yeah, and I would argue if you're not giving it to them, they're gonna get it on their own. And when they go out and find this information on their own, you're no longer in charge of the message. You're
Yep.
no longer in charge of what competitors might be saying. So why not you? Why not you taking the moment to map these out and making sure that you are giving them what might seem like granular tactical information in your messaging, but actually is perfectly suited for what they need at the time.
Yep.
Otherwise, they're going to go to ChatGPT, they're going to go to Reddit, they're going to go to comments, right, in social media, they're going to go to friends, and that's fine, and that's the way most of it happens. But a brand can take the time to create the right content and messaging and insert themselves. And so you're driving the decision, right, or you're helping the decision rather than somebody else.
You're owning the moments that matter. You're truly empowering them, to your first point. That empowerment leads to engagement. That engagement leads to trust and ultimately leads to enrollment. And option B is, to your point, don't satisfy upon that. Let the competition do the same thing, create the content, create the engagement, create the trust, and also capitalize on all the data. Because every single time that you tell a story, it might be emotional, it might be functional, it might be upper funnel, it might be lower funnel. There is data that can be leveraged in a very positive and empowering way to continue to fulfill upon their unmet needs,
Yep.
which I think probably segues over to the last pillar, which is connect brand to demand. Can you unpack that one a little bit?
Most marketers think that they have to choose between brand advertising or performance advertising, and I would argue you don't have to choose. You can connect the entire funnel, and when we say connect brand to demand, that's exactly what we mean. So everything we put out in market is meant to follow a customer journey, and so there are, for example, more emotional messaging you might put farther up in the funnel. And then as you start to move down, you're transitioning into more functional, tactical messaging. And there are signals out in the marketplace that allow you to understand where somebody is in the journey. And then you can place the right content and message against that.
And I think that's such a huge point because when you go back to what you mentioned earlier in brute force is about separating brand and demand. They're spending literally millions, if not billions of dollars at the top of the funnel trying to get their story across, very often on TV or CTV, leaving the entire middle part of the funnel or journey completely untouched, then smashing them with demand stuff, hoping that for some reason the people you hit with those conversion tactics have already seen your upper funnel tactics. And I think to your point, it's not just about leaning both into brand and demand, it's about connecting the two.
Look, we all know it's hard when data is not shared across channels and platforms. But let me give you a window into how we might tackle that.
Yeah.
So let's just look at Meta, which I would argue is probably the number two channel in terms of performance outside of search.
Yep.
And I think that's true for most brands. Meta is a walled garden, but you can actually create a brand to demand funnel inside of Meta. They just launched the Andromeda update. The Andromeda update says, I want tons of creative, different creative, or I'm just not going to serve my ads to your customers. Okay, fine. Most people are going in with a single objective and they're trying to make it work with lots of different creative. What we would do is say, no, let's break this up into mid funnel and lower funnel. So we would launch a campaign with mid funnel content that might be part emotional, part functional. And our whole goal is to build a custom audience of people who have engaged with the ad. They've viewed it, they've liked it, maybe they've shared it, maybe they've commented on it. If you do that, I put you in a custom audience. You are now warmed, right? So if you are a warmed audience, and then I serve you a lower funnel ad, offer based, very functional or feature based, you are 3 times more likely to click on that ad. And you're also a better qualified candidate to click through. So that is a great example of how you might connect brand to demand, but you might just do it inside of Meta.
Yeah. And better lifetime value because they're not going to you just because the lower rate and then they're going to click out when they get a slightly better savings account or slightly better credit card. They've now converted because they align with your core positioning, which is the story that you're telling in the mid funnel, right? So first of all, I love that. I think it's probably the most powerful form of marketing in the entire universe right now. I think it's more powerful than search. Search in a lot of ways you're capturing that demand that's already been created and you can do what you're describing right within Google, you can hit them with sort of upper and mid funnel on YouTube and then convert them lower in search. But I don't think I've ever seen anything more powerful than what you can do in social media in terms of Meta's ability to build those custom audiences. And just to unpack that a little bit, what you're saying is once people engage in that content, we know exactly who they are. And we don't need to repeat the same message over and over and over again. We can start telling a sequential story, one that emotionally engages, educates, and ultimately functionally engages and gets them to enroll, which is totally different than old school advertising, which is just blasting them over the head in one channel and hoping to God it's the same people that you smash them with in a subsequent channel.
I'll leave you with this. Don't look at your brand advertising as just driving brand health metrics. We approach every piece of content, whether it's upper, middle, or lower, as being incredibly intentional in driving action. And if your ads leave people moving them one step farther down the funnel, then that is the definition of connecting brand to demand.
And I think the big point is marketing and advertising really just isn't satisfying people's needs. And financial services aren't satisfying people's needs. It turns out 74% of people feel like the marketing that they're exposed to doesn't work. 85% of ads at this moment are now proven to not be remembered. So what's happening is, in response to the fact that people are tuning these ads out, is they're just creating more ads, more noise, more soft mark messages, more goofy characters. And then you look at credit unions, the most authentic brands in the world, truly selfless organizations that care about one thing and one thing only, taking care of members and their families. There's nothing more heartwarming and powerful than that. And I think everything we've talked about here are pieces of a bigger puzzle. Empower, don't just entertain. Own the moments that matter and connect brand to demand, which ultimately means look at the world through the lens of your members, give them the content and information that they're looking for, don't interrupt their journey, carry them through their journey. And that's how credit unions win.
Brand Champions is a QUESTUS production. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and review wherever you tune in. You can submit mailbag questions to brandchampions@questus.com.